Up Your Game with CMO Coaches is for current and aspiring chief marketing officers. Each episode will feature one of our experienced CMO coaches focusing on a topic that they are passionate about to help you up your game. Today we have Alan Gellman, who's the CEO and founder of Convivo Leadership, an executive coach who works with leaders and their teams. His mission is to help successful people succeed more, increase long-term joy and impact for themselves, their teams, and their organizations. Most of his coaching is at the C-level executives, as well as those at the senior vice president and VP level. He coaches across industries and leaders in companies ranging from Fortune 50 to startups. His 30-year career in marketing and general management spanned many industries, including financial services, insurance, healthcare, and consumer packaged goods. Alan has a passion and talent for helping people with their leadership impact, interpersonal relationships, communication skills, or personal growth, such as executive presence. He's married with 2 children in the San Francisco Bay Area and loves cycling and hiking in the Bay Area hills. Welcome to Up Your Game with CMO Coaches, Alan.
Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm loving the different guests you're having and Up Your Game. So happy to be here and great to be in conversation with you.
Should be a great conversation. Today's topic, as you know, is building influence in the C-suite. Every leader, and especially those who are in or near the C-suite, needs to build influence in order to be successful. Technical skills likely got you where you are, but influencing others, the C-suite, board members, other senior peers, and even your senior direct reports is what's going to drive your success going forward. You've navigated large and complex organizations as a leader, and you bring a knowledge as well as your executive coaching experience to leaders across many complex organizations of all sizes. So we'll start off, Alan. What is influence and how do we get started?
Yeah, well, it's an important starting point because people can talk about, you need to build your influence and it matters. And so often it's the old, what got you here won't get you there. Many of us have read the book. It's putting it into action. It's being clear on what are your intentions. You can't have influence and you can't start to build that influence if you're not clear on what you're trying to accomplish. And the more you want to have impact at scale, the more you grow in your career, the more you need to be able to influence others. And yes, be influenced by them too. Can't be a one-way street. So influence is how you get things done at more senior levels. And getting started is about first caring and wanting to have influence, having the intention to build influence and to be influenced.
What does it mean to be effective in a senior role at doing that?
Yeah. So starting point is many of us believe, I know I did when I was, at a director level or working my way up, was that we have more power the more senior we get. Well, that's actually not necessarily true. We have way more influence the more senior you get. But power comes from the influence, not from the telling people what to do. Let me give you an example. Think about a time in your career when maybe you had a boss and you were already pretty senior. Well, I'll do this for me. When I was in a position and I was a VP or got to SVP before I was a CMO. And at one point I had a boss who wanted to be much more directive, telling me what to do, how to do it. I was not motivated. I would do what they told me to do, sure. Guess what? That boss did not get the most out of me. And that's true for us as leaders. The more senior we are, the more senior our team is, the more capable our team is. And we want to keep them motivated. So the starting point is recognizing that your power actually comes from influence as you grow. So you have to be, that's how you get effective as in a senior role. It's also what's the scale of impact you can have in your direct report area versus across the organization. If you want to have that scale of impact, you need to work across business lines, across functional areas. People who don't report to you may not care about your goals, but if they want to work with you and you can bring them around to saying, yeah, this matters for me too, for us too, then that's going to be much greater impact. And then the one more thing I'll share here, which is consider how you're spending your time. The more time you're spending down in your vertical organization, the less time you're spending across and up. And our impact is across and up much more than down. If you've built your team effectively, then you're letting them run the business in that function or that business unit. And you can have your impact and be clear about what is yours to do. And I'll probably come back to this later by operating across lines.
What does it mean to build influence in the C-suite, and how do you go about doing that?
So that's probably I guess, $64,000 question. May date me a little here. That's $1 million question. So it starts with, what alliances do you need? Let's be clear. Understand, who do you need to get things done? How are you going to be successful? And so think about two territories. One, for you, success may be, I want to get that next promotion. It also might be, I have this area of control or responsibility, and I need to get these three things done. This new brand campaign, this growth in the organization, this new website developed and launched, whatever it is. Be clear about what you need to get done, what you want to get done, and who do you need to get it done. And then you build your circle of influence. So the circle of influence is a very simple concept that the words speak for themselves, and yet they don't, because it's a very pragmatic approach to saying, who are the top 5 leaders, not 10, but the top 5 leaders who are going to impact your success in achieving what you want to get done over the next 12 to 18 months. And that may be getting promoted. More often it's that, but also it's actually about what you want to get done, what you want to launch, what you want to create. So your boss is almost always one of your circle of influence. Others are maybe obvious. A CFO will often be one, not always. A direct report is sometimes one. That on the one hand, you can tell them what to do, but maybe that direct report's been around a long time and has skills you don't, or influence around an organization that without them, you actually can't get it done so effectively. And some peers are almost like the CFO, are almost always going to be one. If you're working on major digital transformation, for example, CIO or CTO better be one of that in that circle of influence. So get clear on who they are first and why they're on the short list. Second, what do they think of you today? How much do you have? What's your instinct? You may or may not know for sure. What's your instinct? What do they think of you now? Third, what do you want them to think of you? How do you want them to feel about you? And then what's your action plan? Fourth column. What's your action plan to move from B to C, to move from what they think of you now to what you want them to think of you and how you want them to feel about you? Sometimes that means biweekly one-on-ones. Sometimes that means keeping them more updated, asking their opinions more. Sometimes that's about helping them get something done that you actually don't care much about, but it's valuable for them and it builds the relationship. So you build the influence in the C-suite by being clear on what alliances you need. Who are shadow leaders? Could be that direct report, or it could be somebody that the CEO just always listens to and no one quite knows why. Turns out they've been playing tennis for 30 years or 10 years, whatever. And they just use them as a sounding board. You want to know that, and now you want to be able to influence that person. You want to get clear on everybody's agenda. You have your agenda. The organization has their agenda. Each human has their own agenda. Each human has their own fears and triggers. And make sure you know what they are so you know how best to work with each person. Playing the long game, recognizing it's not about this short-term win I'm trying to get to, but rather I need these relationships, I need these people, and they need me, or I want them to need me too.
What are some tools or tactics that we could think about using to build that influence with those people?
So once you know the who and why they're on the list and what you're trying to accomplish, now start, and this gets missed way too often. Start with emotional intelligence. People use the phrase all the time. I'm not going to get into all the factors of it here, but there's actually 7 major components of emotional intelligence. And it only matters and it only shows up when there's conflict. So, or at least that's when it matters most. If everything's going great, it's not so hard to have emotional intelligence. Hey, Alan, how you doing today? Glad you're doing well. How are the kids? Great. And actually caring. When there's tension, when there's conflict in this moment right now with each other, that's not easy to stay with the other human and with yourself and knowing yourself. What triggers you? What gets in your way? So first, start with emotional intelligence. Start with empathy, compassion, caring about the other human. Do you actually care? Because it's all about relationships first. And I can't put enough emphasis here. And some of our listeners are going to hear this and be like, yeah, get to the what. This is the what, everybody. This is the beginning and the most important part of the what, which is how you interact and how you build a relationship. A tool within that is inquiry versus advocacy. How are you bringing your curiosity and true listening, active listening? We hear the words, we say the words, deep listening. But are we really practicing it? Versus, I'm thinking about what my response to that obstacle is going to be, or how I'm going to advocate for my point of view and my mission. And yes, have a point of view, know where you want to go. But now step back and bring inquiry. And specifically, another tool is humble inquiry. There's a great book by the same name, Edgar Schoen. And the key points are actually the 2 words of the title, humble inquiry. Start with humility. Do you actually know all the answers? Do you know all the obstacles? Do you know all the key players? Of course you don't. Even when you think you do, bring the humility to recognize I'm probably missing something. And let me explore what that might be. And that's with the inquiry, the true depth of inquiry. The book gives all kinds of additional tips within that. And then the next tool is, and I mentioned it a little bit ago, is the long game. Make sure you're playing the long game. What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to do it with? And I'll give you an example. Years ago, one of my last few roles was running digital marketing for Wells Fargo. Big team, massive scale of what we were trying to accomplish, how much we were spending, all that. And at one point, we realized we were in the credit groups, and each of the 7 different credit businesses was coming at everybody. Oh, we can solve your problem. Get a credit card, get a home equity account, get a mortgage, get a personal loan, whatever. And we needed to step back and say, how are we in service of our customer? So we built a debt consolidation tool that was agnostic on the product, the right answer for Wells Fargo and the right answer for the customer, not the right answer for each of us in the business units. And so one of my peers said, no, we need to ask this question with this way, because they're thinking it's going to send more business to my product. And that wasn't the best answer for the customer or for the company, but it was a really important relationship. So I said, I'll tell you what, let's do a beta test and use the question your way with the answers your way. And I'm not sure I think it's right, but I may be wrong. Maybe you're right. So let's try it your way first. And let's see what the customer experience is. And let's see how much the pull through is. Let's measure it for 2 weeks. And if it's working, awesome. We're off to a great start. And if it's not, we'll revisit it. It didn't work. I knew it wouldn't. And we revisited it 2 weeks later. I showed her the data. She said, you know what? Let's try it a different way. This one didn't work. She and I to this day are friends. And we would not have been if I'd pushed my way through. She then was an advocate for getting things done and collaborating and figuring out. So that was playing the long game. In that case, not even so long. Sometimes it's a much longer game than that. Be clear about what you're trying to accomplish and what's your pathway to getting there.
Well, I love the tactics and the tools, and I love that example. Tell me more about how the role of trust impacts your ability to build influence.
Yeah, that's great. Such an important word, and we haven't used it yet here today. Everything we've been talking about is exactly about building trust. And another good book, I love books, even if I only scan most of them, But Stephen Covey's Speed of Trust is a terrific read and an easily scannable one. And he lays out, I think, 13 different behaviors that define trust in 4 categories. Excuse me. And a really simple example of it, that if you're going to build trust, you need to extend trust first. What does that mean? Assume positive intent. Believe that Alan is going to be in your corner and helping you, not your enemy. Extend trust, and then people are way more willing to extend trust to you. It's, of course, all the other basics of trust. Do what you say you're going to do. Be transparent. If you're going to disagree professionally. There's another concept that's really important. It could have been in the tools list too. I have a client who does a great job of thinking about the balance of strategic patience with what they call professionally prickly. And I love the term, and I love the two together because they're on the opposite end of a similar continuum. Notice prickly alone is never a good thing. Professionally prickly is just like, I hear what you're saying, Alan, but help me understand more because I think we may be missing something here. It's very professional and respectful. It's also clear. It's related to radical candor, by the way, or compassionate candor, another tool in the process. And think about when you want to lean into that and when do you want to just bring strategic patience back to the long game. Let me understand. Let me build these relationships. I have a client who runs a business unit for a North American business unit for a global tech company. And they're the North America piece, but they have a lot of impact and are influenced by the global leadership. And sometimes there's some challenging personalities. We all come across them. Don't assume they're enemies, even if they feel like it. But how do you bring strategic patience to really listening? What does that person need from me? How can I listen? Challenge in appropriate times. Know the when. When am I going to engage? With whom? And how? And why? So you're building trust with strategic patience. You're building trust with professional prickly. You're building trust with inquiry and appropriate advocacy. And when you're speaking your truth doesn't make it the truth. Use a lowercase t. Speak your truth with a lowercase t, not all caps truth, right? It's understand what does it mean for you? What do you believe? And how are you now engaging with others? Because when you're doing that and you're inviting other truths, other right answers, you're building trust.
Well, there are those moments where you're going to have to maybe speak up. How do you balance that notion of speaking up on the things that matter versus just going with the flow?
We each come from a different starting point. We have different temperaments. I happen to be a big fan of a tool called the Enneagram. Many listeners will know it. Those who don't, think about it as the intersection of Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinders, both on steroids. Fantastic tool. I invite people to learn more about it. Some people they start as assertive. They're going to lean in. They're going to be a lean in type. Others are going to be I want to step back and process some. I'm even going to withdraw. And I'm going to get what I want by stepping back, listening, learning, and working around, coming back. And a third type works the system by going along to get along. They'd much rather have that peace in the environment and figure out how to get things done through peace and engagement and compliant approach. And all three are right. All three are powerful. And I'm betting some of your listeners are thinking, yeah, no. That one, assertive is a stupid idea, or assertive is the only way. And both of those views are, I'll just say it, wrong. In my career, I was much more in that assertive space. And I actually struggled with this concept when I was first getting into it. Now, having worked with it with well over 100 leaders, I see the power of each of those three and having all three in the toolkit. So the balance starts with know your temperament, know what your bias is going to be. And then think about courage. Where are you bringing courage? And guess what? There's no such thing as courage without fear or anxiety. There's no anxiety or fear. There's no courage. You're just going, right? I mean, how to think about strategic engagement. What's the when, the how, the with whom? And be clear on to what end. If there's a lost cause that you're championing, let go. So I have a client in a much smaller organization where they were going to be changing their brand. They'd already made the decision to change the name of the company. This is not a small decision. They'd done a lot of thinking, a lot of reasoning, a lot of work on it. And there was a VP, a direct report to the CEO, who was very much in disagreement with it, or at least thought it wasn't fully thought through. Well, she knows in hindsight that she could have approached that differently than she did, because she was in that assertive space, and that style worked for her so often. And she was being crystal clear, and maybe not the nicest ways or easiest to hear ways, of why it wasn't a good answer. Rather than saying, you know what? That horse has left the barn. So let's talk about what risks there might be and how we might mitigate them together. How are you showing up? How are you making your choices? And when are you bringing that strategic patience versus professionally quickly?
I love that idea. And now I have to ask, because I've heard that you have this idea of a special fund that everyone needs to have in place. Tell me about this fund and what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start by talking about you understanding what's holding you back. If you're not leaning in, or you're leaning in too much, why? Is it because you're being strategic and it's the wrong timing? Awesome. Or pointless in the example I just used, if a horse left the barn. Or sometimes it's a lack of confidence. And sometimes it's fear. And if it's fear, and pardon the French, but the fund, make sure you have what I call a fuck it fund. And that is a 6 months of salary in the bank, that if what it is fear that you're just going to get fired for speaking your mind, if that's what's keeping you from being courageous and offering, figure out a way to work through your fear. Make sure it's not just an excuse to be bold and be assertive and break China. No, it's not that. I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating clarity and picking your battles, but not being afraid to lean in. I've got a client who is not at all afraid to lean in. And he at times has gotten himself in trouble with how aggressive he's gotten. And he actually got to a place where they loved him, but you need to change how you're showing up. It's not going to work out. In that case, he had gone too far. He actually was not being effective. But I have another client where they're all about going along to get along and never leaning in and realizing, I don't like conflict, or horse has probably left the barn. Do you know that? If you believe something, you believe it strongly, speak up. I had a boss say to me, I already shared, I leaned in on the assertive side. And I had a boss tell me once, Alan, you're the most courageous leader who's ever worked for me. By the way, he only meant that 80% positive. 20% of him was like, get out of my face. Enough. I said no. And I needed to learn that too. But don't be afraid. Be willing to lean in.
We've had so many conversations with great CMO coaches like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's one more question I wanted to ask you, which is when you're thinking about considering a coach, what should you consider? What should you think about?
It's a great question. The starting point is, do I want to grow? Do I want to develop myself? Am I all in on me as a leader? I've got all these incredible skills that got me here. And then there's probably some gaps of how am I showing up? And I actually had this conversation with a chief people officer today, where she's like, yeah, we only will pay for coaching for people who are high potential, who are already living in these key roles and can expand their wings and need some support. So what do you, each of you listening or watching this, how do you want to grow? What kind of support do you want? Are you willing to champion that for yourself? By the way, CMO coaches can help you put a case together for yourself if you want. But first has to start with, are you all in on you? Be clear about your intentions. Bring inquiry and curiosity to yourself. What are my strengths? What are my blind spots? That's a hard one, right? But you kind of know. You've gotten feedback. Or get help. I do 360s. We all do 360s all the time, special kinds of them usually, which I won't get into here. But come from a centered, caring place for yourself. Bring intention for yourself, much like you should be bringing intention and inquiry and curiosity to the what you're trying to do in your day-to-day job. And then don't forget to focus in on the relationships, because all your success comes down to your relationships. It comes down to people, not people as a pathway to getting past and through, but people to work with so you can help them succeed, they can help you succeed, and you can achieve a vision together. So be clear on who you want to be, how you want to show up in the world, what you want to be known for, and then what support you need to get
there. Love it. Well, we've covered a lot of great principles and tips and techniques today on how to build influence in the C-suite, or just how to build influence.
Yeah.
Which one do you think is the most important that we should take away from today's conversation? If we only could take one thing.
Well, I can. I have to do two because
Okay.
but they're both super short, and I just said them a minute ago. It's a recap. Be clear on what's your intention, and be clear about what relationships you want and need and how you're going to build them.
Alan, thank you so much for coming on
Yeah,
Up Your Game with CMO Coaches. It's always great to talk to somebody with the same name as myself. So
you spell your name the right way, Alan.
I know. I feel like this is going to blow up the internet just along with itself. So thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
This episode of Up Your Game is brought to you by CMO Coaches. If you want to work with a coach, visit cmocoaches.com. This episode is brought to you in collaboration with Club CMO. Club CMO is an exclusive member organization that brings together chief marketing officers and other senior marketing executives for networking, knowledge sharing, and professional development. Through a peer-led, no-selling environment, the club provides exclusive access for marketing leaders to connect, exchange ideas, and stay up to date on industry trends and everyday challenges. This content was produced by Sam Robertson.